Imagine living your entire life passing down your land, your wealth, and your name to a child, with absolutely zero scientific proof that they are actually yours. Today, a quick DNA test can tell us with near certainty. But for thousands of years, that technology didn't exist, and humans had to solve this problem using only observation. So how did they do it? Did ancient humans have some natural way of knowing who the father was? Did fathers simply trust mothers? Were our ancestors actually less concerned about paternity than modern people? Or is it possible that, for most of human history, nobody really knew who the father was? The answer reshaped marriage, family, and even the way civilizations were built, and it's far more surprising than you might think. Because the truth begins with something modern science tells us is absolutely impossible: a single child being born with three biological fathers. Today, we know conception is a single event. One sperm, one egg, one split second, and the genetic blueprint is locked. Done. But if you lived among the Barí people of Venezuela or several other indigenous tribes in the Amazon basin, you would view pregnancy completely differently. To them, making a baby wasn't a one-time event. It was a construction project. They believed a child had to be built, nourished, and physically formed inside the womb over the course of many months. And one man simply could not provide enough raw material to get the job done alone. So a pregnant woman would have her primary husband, but she might also discreetly invite other men to contribute to the pregnancy. She would choose the best hunter, or the strongest warrior, or the hardest worker, believing each man's unique traits would literally be poured into the growing baby. But wait, if a woman was sleeping with multiple men, didn't that concern the primary husband? You hunt, you bleed, and you risk your life every single day to provide for a child who might not even be yours. Didn't they get even slightly jealous? In most modern societies, that scenario sounds like a recipe for conflict. Many psychologists believe jealousy evolved, at least in part, to discourage people from investing their time and resources in someone else's offspring. But here is the wildest part: in these societies, that jealousy was far less important than you might expect. When the baby was born, the mother would openly name the men who helped build the child. The village accepted it without hesitation. One father might proudly say, "I gave him his strength," while another would say, "And I gave him his bones." It sounds like biological madness, but in a brutal, unforgiving jungle, it was actually a masterstroke of survival. Think about it. One father can get bitten by a snake. One father can fall from a tree. One father can simply fail to find enough food. But three fathers, suddenly that child has a biological safety net. Three different men are bringing meat to the mother's fire. Three different men are protecting that child, and the data proves that it worked. When anthropologists actually tracked the numbers, they found that children with multiple recognized fathers were 16% more likely to survive to age 15. In the ancient world, 16% is the difference between your bloodline conquering the future or vanishing into the dirt. This wasn't primitive ignorance. It was a brilliant, calculated evolutionary hack, which immediately raises a massive question. If people believed you could just combine three men to make one baby, did ancient humans even understand how reproduction actually works? Most people assume the answer is no. We love to imagine our distant ancestors as completely clueless, but that is simply not true. Ancient humans absolutely knew that sex caused babies. The clues were impossible to miss. They lived intimately with nature. They watched animals mate, and they saw pregnancies follow. They noticed that about 9 moons after a man and a woman were together, a baby arrived. You don't need modern science to spot a pattern that obvious. Here is what actually surprises us. They weren't confused about whether sex caused pregnancy. They were confused about how pregnancy worked. Without microscopes or genetics, they had to reverse engineer human biology based purely on what they could see with their own eyes. And because they couldn't see cells, different cultures came up with wildly different, completely logical, and entirely incorrect explanations. Take the ancient Greeks. If you asked the brilliant philosopher Aristotle where babies come from, he would tell you about the seed and the soil. Aristotle believed that the father supplied the entire child. In his mind, the man's seed contained the complete microscopic blueprint of a human being. The mother, she contributed absolutely nothing to the child's identity. She was just the soil, a warm, fertile place for the man's seed to grow. If you think Aristotle's explanation sounds bizarre, wait until you hear what people on the Trobriand Islands believed. To them, human life was an endless, beautiful cycle. When someone died, their spirit traveled to a distant island of the dead, but eventually that spirit would want to return to the physical world. So an ancestor's spirit would journey back across the ocean, find a woman from the same bloodline, and enter her womb to be reborn. So what was the point of the man? In their view, the physical act of sex was just a mechanical necessity to open the path for the spirit to enter. The man wasn't making the baby, he was basically just unlocking the door. Because of this, the child belonged entirely to the mother's bloodline. The father contributed zero spiritual substance and zero flesh. He was essentially just a friendly roommate. If a boy needed a male role model, he didn't look to the man who lived with his mother. He looked to his mother's brother, his uncle, who actually shared that sacred ancestor blood. So, if you couldn't prove who the father was biologically, and every culture had a different theory about how it worked, how did anyone know who was supposed to raise the child? This is where human civilization made its biggest pivot. The oldest paternity test in human history wasn't about genetics. It wasn't about looking for matching eye colors or nose shapes. The oldest paternity test was behavior. In most ancient societies, the presumed father was simply the man who stayed with the mother during the pregnancy. Long before DNA, society cared far more about responsibility than absolute certainty. And this is exactly why the institution of marriage became a cornerstone of human survival. Across countless different cultures, marriage functioned as a binding social declaration. It was a man standing in front of his tribe, his village, or his kingdom and saying, "This is my child, and I will feed it." Marriage wasn't invented for romance. It was invented to lock men into the family unit, ensuring that helpless human infants had the resources they needed to survive. For almost all of human history, fatherhood was never really about biology. Some societies believed one child could have 3 fathers. Others believed fathers contributed nothing at all. Some trusted resemblance. Others trusted marriage. But in every case, humans solved the same problem: raising children in a world where nobody could ever be completely certain. DNA finally answered the question. Civilization was built before anyone knew the answer.